This episode of the eCommerce Playbook is brought to you by the Make Ads That Convert training series from creative analytics platform Motion. This free virtual series will take you deep into the mechanics of making Facebook and TikTok ads that convert like crazy. Get unrivaled access to world-class experts for an intensive 5-part training series every Thursday from May 23rd to June 20th. Check out the link in the show notes to get your free ticket today.
Welcome back to another episode of the eCommerce Playbook Podcast, where we are interviewing those GQ giants, the brands that we are all aspiring to learn from and to become. And today I'm excited to be joined by one of my secret Twitter DM friends. Me and Steven get a lot of time together in the Twitter DMs, just trading ideas. This is an incredible, intelligent founder of an amazing D2C business. He's also a SoCal guy, so I also like that we get to trade on that. But Steven, stoked to have you, man. Glad we could finally jam it out in person on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here. I'm a huge disciple, maybe is a good word to use, of kind of your learnings. They've echoed a lot of the stuff that we've learned the hard way. So, I don't know if I send all of like the young entrepreneurs that I talk to that are starting in e-com. I'm like, go watch his YouTube videos. They're really informative. I still listen to them because everything's changed.
It's funny, man. Like, you probably similar to me. I get this a lot where when I meet people in person, they're always like, dude, you're way nicer than I think you are on Twitter. I don't know if you get that a lot, but that was my experience. I was like, dang, this guy's got some edgy opinions. And then I got on with you and I found you to be an incredibly humble, kind, considerate, awesome human. And so I'm excited for hopefully more people to get that experience today. But you just touched on something that I think was really the genesis of us talking, was like, you talked about challenge and you talked about the journey that Cuts has been on. For how long you guys been around now? 7 years? Like, give us a little bit of the story. Okay, so give us a little bit of the story, and then if you could focus on the post-COVID era and what has really been changing for you guys in this next season.
Yeah, so we launched end of 2017. Really, we did like 180K in 2017. Just started, and then we quickly got to 10 mil like overnight, essentially. But we launched in 2017, and we really predominantly focused on just the men's t-shirt. I was working at an advertising agency at the time, and my boss kicked me out of a meeting, and he said that Lululemon shirt isn't formal enough for the work attire, so I wasn't able to present the presentation. At the time, I was really good friends with the Movement Watches founders and the Pura Vida, but they were one size fits all, whereas watches and bracelets. And I thought, I wonder if just a simple black work t-shirt is I hadn't seen anyone do it. Maybe this is my opportunity to take a shot at e-commerce. So I did what any other, college, recent grad did. I moved home, teamed up with 4 guys. I teamed up with an accountant, a photographer, a videographer, and an operations guy. And we said, hey, let's start a e-commerce brand, and we were going to call it Cuts. And the name came from, we were at Lululemon, and the scoop tees, elongated tees, were really popular at that time. And I thought, I wish this tee didn't have the logo on it. It had the scoop, and that would be perfect to wear to work. And it didn't wrinkle. It didn't shrink in the wash. And that's where the name Cuts came from. And, we launched on Kickstarter, did 44K. And then, quickly, like a year and a half in, we had 4 guys doing 10 million with no full-time employees and no office. And we used all of the revenue to fuel the business. And today we have sold, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cuts, and still learning. And it feels like we're just getting going.
It's amazing, man. Really incredible story. And it has been, for many brands, a wild, amidst that 7-year story, in particular in apparel, the last 3 years, for a lot of the partners we've worked with, have been an incredibly challenging time for a few reasons. One is we all know the sort of sudden demand that COVID created. I'd be curious to hear about what that was like for you guys. But then on the back end of that, there was this challenge, which is that the lead times for production on apparel tend to be a little longer. As the demand was going crazy, there was large POs that had to be made. A lot of businesses ended up in a challenging inventory position and had to work through that as they got to the other half of the year. Did you guys experience any of that? What's it been like for you guys for the last 3 years in particular?
Yeah, up to end of 21, it felt like we could do no wrong. We were a single SKU brand, which is a big part of why things not went wrong, but became a lot challenging. And the worst thing that happened was we launched joggers, and we absolutely killed it. Without using numbers, we sold, an incredible amount of joggers. But secretly, that was maybe the worst thing that happened because it was the second product. And we were like, hey, we can turn on a new product and do, make it a 6-figure a day almost immediately. But the third and fourth and fifth product aren't going to have that same level. So just to summarize, 2021 happened. We were 10-month lead times. We had to order everything sight unseen. And we aired stuff in, which is a key part of this because which was significantly cost because we had one ship that was stuck in the LA port for, almost like 4 months. So we aired stuff in. And then by the time we aired it in, demand started to kind of slow down in 22. And then now our COGS weren't as good. So that's really when the issues started happening for us coming out of
So
COVID.
This is such a common thing that I think people miss about sudden changes in demand that are so hard to manage. And is that they create a lot of challenges. One, when you rush the inventory, you create additional cost, right? It just costs more to send things in the air than it does by boat. Two, it's really hard to predict the future demand when there's that much sudden change, right? And so I'd be curious, like if you go back to that moment pre that launch, what would you have done differently about the pacing following that big initial hit? Like, so joggers hit, what would you have done differently, if anything, knowing what you know now relative to the challenges that got created from that indigestion, if you will?
That year, I think we grew just short of 200%. Leading up to 21, we sold out of like our white and black tees in June. And that was like the last period in time we thought we would have to place orders because the lead times were so long to get a bunch of new stuff. So we said, okay, we grew 200%. We cut the growth trajectory down to like 100% for the next year, which was still way too much. I think Mike Beckham says this all the time, and he's like one of my favorite founders on Twitter. He's like, growth can be a terrible thing if you're not prepared for it from an operational standpoint. So I probably would have paid more attention to like the team structure and the growth structure and said, okay, if we want to grow 100%, now that our number's bigger, the business is bigger. Do we have liquidation options if we fulfill 80% of that, 70% of that, 60% of that, and made sure if on a rainy day, we were still good. So one of the Toomey group I'm friends with, and they're mentors of mine. And one of the things they did really well that led to a lot of their successes, they've looked at liquidation options. And liquidation options can be, sales on your website that are kind of hidden, like Lululemon's "we made too much" section. It could be certain wholesalers. It could be out of country options that can take them at COGS. So there's lots of areas that you can kind of get your cash back. But understanding what you're actually doing when you place those POs, because in our heads, it was like, oh, hey, we can always sell more black tees later. We didn't realize how much that could hurt. Now, one of the things we did good during that period was, thank God we were a basics brand at that time, because we did order like 300 days supply of black and white tees. And thank God those don't go out of style, and that we still sell those tees today. I know a lot of businesses that went bankrupt that were more seasonal items that ended up going under because they picked stuff that was out of stock, was out of trend the next season. And, that inventory is worth nothing. So I think one of the things we got lucky on is just the nature of who we are as a brand, which is a minimalist brand isn't the hottest trend brand. So that we got lucky on.
There's so much there that's so important that is a lived experience that I watch people have to discover, which is this idea of liquidation that you talked about. And a lot of times as marketers, we think about most of our impact driving towards improvement of the P&L, right? Which is an effort to create operating income or EBITDA, which is all about the marginal value of the units that we sell. But there's also a huge part, especially in apparel, that I like to call cash-based marketing, which is this idea that at some point, relative to the state of the inventory, the actions that we take to move a unit are all about turning it back into cash more than it is about just creating margin. Because that cash allows you to then go reinvest in a better unit with a better timeline that can create that margin. But there's a real intimate relationship that has to exist between marketing, finance, operations in order to do that. And so I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about how you make those decisions? When does a product move from, okay, we're moving from a standard sale process or general acquisition to liquidation? And how do you make those decisions and know when the right time to do that is? And how does the team coordinate around those ideas?
So even taking a step back, one of the biggest lessons I learned is you have to understand what the product when you buy it will do for you. Is it a growth product? So, using our block tees, that's an item that we can take a little bit more risk on because it's a growth product. And we're saying, hey, there's cheap CPMs, the TAM is huge, and it's something that we want to build our business. So we look at, is it a growth product or is it a seasonal product that will give our returning customers more reason to come back? But we need to order it very low because we know it's not something you can spend a lot of ad dollars behind because it is a little bit more trendy and the TAM of it is much lower. So starting off, like we always go, is it a growth product? And we actually have very little growth products now that we go really deep in. A lot of the products are very shallow to create a seasonal moment in spring, seasonal moment in summer, August and so forth. But that's how we order products. Because I think if you get that wrong, you can have there's nothing you can do really to fix that. So just ordering them right is really important. But from a cash basis, maybe taking another step, one, to answer your last question, having a good cash flow model that works in with your growth team and have your CFO and your head of growth really locked in. And as a founder, you have to know that. I wasn't very good with that. And we got burned by not having a good cash flow model and had to use debt. And you don't want to use debt because it's just a chokehold on your growth. And so I'm kind of rambling, but understanding a good cash flow model is super important.
Was the impetus, and you said you touched on a little bit about you got burned, that brought together your CFO and your head of growth? Because this is kind of the thing I'm always interested in, is that my experience, like yours, Stephen, is that is a byproduct of something having to be messed up first. And so part of the point of this podcast and the content I create is like, how do we help founders create the impetus for those two people to get in a room ahead of time? And what does that workflow look like now for you guys? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that between marketing and finance. How do those sides of the organization interact?
Well, we have a daily, similar to what you've built. I think we modeled it after. We look at contribution margin on a daily basis. So we start overall, just on an overall basis. What is our contribution margin? That's going to help fuel if we spend more or don't spend more from an overall level. And then when we're ordering products, understanding contribution margin is more important than gross margin. Because if you think your CAC's going to be super high for a product, then the gross margin doesn't really matter. And that's something, we have great margins, but contribution margin per product differs. And, especially in the women's space, I'll use an example. Like we had an 80% gross margin on a woman's like kind of bra piece, but our CAC was really high. So our contribution margin wasn't very good on that. So then we had to lower price and we ended up having a bad gross margin. So understanding the CAC per product category before you buy it is like, it's really hard. Actually, we're still not the best at it, but, talk to guys like Taylor, do your research, understand, other brands. A lot of the data is out there that you can, use to help inform you. One thing we just do is like from a simple basis, you have guys and girls on your website. For apparel, what is in your closet that you actually wear the most? We were lucky, our first two products, joggers and tees, you could wear, a couple times a week at least. So there's the need for a lot of them versus like our Chileno button-up shirt that you could go to Coachella and that was one of those products we ordered too many of. If we didn't get through it by the end of June, that's going to be tough for the rest of the year to get through it. Maybe even really the end of May. And then festival season's kind of over. And then contribution margin is going to tank on that. So contribution margin has to do with CAC and time period as well, which is how each of them can be.
You're getting to something so important, which is that every product is almost its own little business model, right? So if you think about, you're talking about whether it's a new customer acquisition or returning product, okay? And then you're talking about the expected consumption rate and LTV potential of a category, right? So like you talked about, that button-up shirt, we have to make sure we make a margin on that initial purchase because you're not going to buy 10 of those. It's just not the way that product is set up. But whereas on the white tee, I could see being closer to break even on first order makes a ton of sense because we know that we're going to get a much higher consumption, higher LTV off that category. And so this is where, as businesses expand beyond their single thing, they have to begin to consider the business model of each category, the business model of each unit and what it intends to do and how you're going to make money off that specific customer persona.
Big announcement, the Make Ads That Convert training series, hosted by the creative analytics platform Motion, is starting on May 23rd. 4 performance marketing megastars, Morella Crespi, Jess Bachman, Savannah Sanchez, and Dara Denny, are coming together on the same stage for the first time to teach you how to power up your creative strategy. They've managed hundreds of millions of dollars in ad spend. They've turned unknown D2C brands into household names. And now they're joining forces to teach you creative operations and planning, ramping up ad production, mastering creative hooks, and more. With your free ticket, you'll get VIP entry to all 5 live sessions, live Q&As and secret bonuses, and recordings of all sessions. So check out the link in the show notes to get your free ticket today.
Yeah, and also what your goals are too for each product. So like in August, we run an anniversary sale. We took the model from Nordstrom's where we do a sale and we release new products. So in order to spend a lot of money, we need to get our AOV up. So making products that are going to be in that 120 to 180 range is really important. So then it fuels. So because we know we want to spend a lot of money, so CAC's going to go up. But those products be ordered to a 5-week supply at most, not even an 8-week or so weeks of supply. And when you order, what your forecast is super important. And I think in 3 years from now, because we're going to be so much better at this, because e-commerce, this is where I think the market is undervaluing e-commerce companies is once you get this figured out on a science basis, then man, the magic can really start to happen. And Cuts is nowhere close where our desired state.
But you're exactly right. We worked with, and you and I have talked about this, our experience with Ann Taylor and Loft. And those businesses at that high of retail level are machines. It is like seasonal product, inventory predicted, and they try to maximize the marginal value of every unit. But at the end of the season, that product's gone. They liquidate it. It is out the door. Cash comes back in. Make the next bet. Bet again. Improve overall gross margin of the season. Get it to cash, bet again. And it's just like, it is clear the objective of how you make money in this business model. They execute against the template. And yeah, some seasons they got the product more right than others. They did a better job hitting trend, style, whatever. But even if they're wrong, gets back to cash, make the bet again. Get back to cash, make the bet again. And they just become so clear on how they make money in this business model. And that's the thing that I've noticed is a big distinction between much more mature legacy brands versus the newer startups.
Yeah, we're Cuts is along that journey. We're not quite there yet, but we're so much better than we have. And I think the big thing, and it goes back to Mike Beckham's quote of wanting to grow too fast, and ego, I think was something is just can bite you in the butt. If we would have in 21 just had lower growth expectations, the problems, we would have still made the same problems, but they wouldn't have been as big or have taken as long to get out of them. And I think understanding just cash flow, I joke about it that I wasn't that good of a student in college, and my accounting classes I was, trying to have fun in college, but I really regret it. I now have a $10 million balance sheet because, I think Matt quoted this is if you have loans and, you're still a profitable company, but you're having to pay that's who you're working for. And they're taking a lot of your money. So we've learned that the hard way. And, Cuts hasn't raised money in theory, but we have used debt at times to fuel the business, and that can get really expensive. And I think as a young founder, you just got so much ambition and that you want to grow. You have really, for Cuts, I was I'm playing with house money. We didn't raise, I don't have any money anyway, so we might as well go for it. And that's really good when you get to kind of get you off the ground when you're at the under 10 million range. But as your business scales, now you have something to lose a little bit, and having that same mantra can really put you under. I mean, without trashing this brand, there was 2 businesses that this one firm was going to invest in 21. It was Cuts and this other, and they were transparent. It was this women's brand. Taylor, I think you know exactly who I'm talking about, but they chose to invest in the women's brand, and they gave them a $25 million check or $30 million check, and they bought a bunch of inventory. And then, 12 months later, their P&L's all over. Everyone has it, and they sold for the value of their inventory. That would have happened to Cuts if we would have got that money. So it was the best thing that never happened. Now, if we haven't raised money, but I think it would be a different story. We learn those lessons. And one of my buddies said that the journey of an entrepreneur is just can you make more positive choices and decisions before the negative ones overtake the positive? That's really the game, especially as a bootstrap founder. So, I'm grateful to say we've made more positive than negative. And the nature of our business out of COVID, just being high repeat rate business, not a ton of seasonal stuff that could burn us, so to speak. But I think at times there's times man, this is going to be a big mountain to climb, and we're still fighting in a lot of ways.
I want to go back to the thing you said about ego, because I there were so many times. So my direct peer set of competitors in the agency world, the Mute Sixes, W Promotes, Power Digitals, these guys have all gone on and sold the business, every one of them. And Steve Weiss from Mute Six is a good friend of mine. And I remember they were like ahead of us, you know, and they ended up selling the business for a lot of money in the middle of COVID. And Steve did a great job. And he's always been a good friend. We've chatted. I remember when I would go sit with him, I would feel this weird pressure to like overstate where we were at. Like I needed to be something in this conversation that made me, and I would leave meeting with him feeling like I should go change my business strategy because of what they were doing. There's just something about this that's so inherent. I don't know if maybe it's an athlete thing too, but like, I'd be curious, how has that changed for you? What created your ability to detach from that comparative game, or is it something you still struggle with? Like, and how have you dealt with that as a founder? Because I feel like you and I have had these conversations where there's been some humbling along the way that kind of gets you to a place where you're like, I'm okay if I don't win this giant sort of facade game that everybody's playing.
Yeah, I think like in the t-shirt space, there's been brands that have come out and, you know, are very revenue focused and you know, as an athlete, and I mean, I want all of the revenue and all of that. And I think having a long-term view of like, I still want to create $1 billion business. That's not going anywhere. But having a more like realistic way to get there, and not, I think your ego can want you to go faster than what's possible at times. And that can put you into trouble. So it's still like having like a big vision, which I have, but it's like doing baby steps to get there. And it doesn't mean you don't take, there's definitely times to take big swings, but there's also times when there isn't. And you got to be able to recognize that, and don't let your ego say, no, we can do it. It's fine. Let's go for it. And I think 22 was that year for us where we came off, you know, 4 years of just monstrous growth. You know, we had the biggest athletes in the world wearing our stuff, and they still do. But, you know, whenever we felt like we were invincible, I think I got one call from a founder who had kind of been one stage above me, and he's like, order all, you got to go for it. Da, 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 da. And I was sitting it was Christmas Eve, 2021. And I remember calling our head of growth, and I was like, we're going for it next year. And that call is etched in my brain. Like, man, I wish I wouldn't have said, hey, let's order all this inventory, because it slowed down. And one cautionary tale is if you grow too fast, sometimes if you zoom out and you look at like a 10-year window, the people that grew or that had a down period and then grew again end up being the same of the groups that kind of took it a little bit more choppy or more incremental year over year. And then when you zoom out, it kind of gets you the same place. So just, you know, growth is important. You need growth, but understanding the type of year it is and where the market is. And sometimes your products, you just don't have it. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he's like, I can tell 12 months ahead of time if it's going to be it, because the products like ad spend and CPMs and none of that matters. It all about the product, and if the market wants that product at that given time. So Cuts, after 5 years of, you know, doing t-shirts, you know, and joggers, that was like the market really wanted that. You know, at times, like we came out with this swim short, this festival collection that totally wasn't our brand, but we tried to push it, and the market was like, maybe that's not what's the best. So I think, you know, just understanding what that product is going to do for, I think, is the best indicator if it's a growth year for you.
There's this guy on TikTok. His name is Jordan Rogers. He used to work at Nike, and he always does these breakdowns of sports marketing campaigns. And he has these pillars where, in order for this to work, you have to have this very rare overlap between a superstar athlete, the product, and the media moment that triggers it. And so he's been talking about how Adidas is getting that sort of holy trifecta right now with Anthony Edwards, where they have a new shoe, they have distribution for him in the playoffs, and they have this rising superstar athlete. And they all culminate in the availability of the product at the right time as he begins to trend. But he talks about how rare it is to get all of those things to move together at the same moment. Is that sometimes you have the right athlete, but they're not on a platform where something big is happening, or there's no real distribution. And it's like that culmination of those things, to your point, is so hard. And if the trend doesn't move at your back, it really doesn't matter what else is happening. And if it does, the CPM on Facebook could be $1,000 and it wouldn't matter. You'd still make money, because it's just this perfect moment where that all comes together. And in marketing, we're always trying to create those. And sometimes it's easy to think we were really bad if we missed it and we're really good when it happens. But it's so often there's this cultural underpinning that is a lot bigger than us that sort of wraps around that product and moment that really drives the success.
Yeah, totally. And I think Nike has always greatly inspired me. But if you think about when they were year like 25, when Jordan came around, and I think about, they did, I think 183 million in that first year with the Jordan 1. And, but they were 20 years in for that, and they were ready for that moment. So I think like having a good balance sheet, it's not like you need a good balance sheet to be ready for that moment, because when that moment comes, you're going to have to take a big risk, but you need to be ready for it. But if Nike wouldn't have had a good balance sheet at that moment, they probably wouldn't have been ready for it. So, totally. Or good relationships with vendors that they can lean on. So, like the below the line stuff is something that I've definitely been more and more focused on as the years have gone on, because it'll help fuel those moments when they come.
Yeah, so true. So you have this $1 billion ambition. And one of the ways that is obvious that you'll have to get there is continue to expand categories. I know Cuts has moved a lot into women's apparel. We've talked a lot about the challenges of a brand going from a very core identity around a men's t-shirt to now we're going to expand that, and how that takes work and it takes investment and it takes different marketing structures. Talk a little bit about the categories that you've gone into recently and maybe how you guys are approaching building a business that has really distinct business units within it after really being single SKU focused for so long.
Yeah, this was another one of the problems, that it's easier to run a single SKU business. Like when it was just t-shirts, we joke about it in the office all the time. Like there's an argument that might have been the better scalable route because it's more predictable, and that product has the margin and the repeat rate and all that. It's easier to manage. Now, our AOV's gone up so significantly over the years. So that's been through product expansions like joggers and bomber jackets that are $275. But, on the marketing side, it's been really challenging because, when Meta came out with ASC, for everyone that's kind of deep in the Facebook game, that just optimizes towards the best products or the best creative. It doesn't really care. It doesn't really matter what the products are. And that's another reason our inventory kind of got lopsided, where it would always optimize towards the best t-shirt ad or the best jogger ad. But some of these other things we had to focus on, it didn't optimize for. And then sometimes the Facebook team, they say, hey, we're not a merchandising platform. We're a growth platform, which is true. So how do you force it, right? While maintaining efficiencies? That's something that's super important. So we've separated our men's and women's account, which was our two business accounts, because you want the clean data. We've also started to separate our international accounts as well. And now we're even separating our by AOV. If it's a really high AOV like jackets, that's a separate account as well. Now, it is against best practices in some ways, but best practices and what's good for the business kind of sometimes can collide. We're just having clean data where okay, on a monthly basis, we're forecasting to spend X amount on this set of product is so important for a brand to have success. Because if you can't forecast spend, you can't demand plan. So that's something that we've had to lean on. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how you're going to be most efficient either. It just means it allows you to have predictability in your
There's
business.
A huge transition. And what you're describing is literally, I believe right now, the single most important next frontier that the e-commerce industry is facing is that to understand that the driving decision for where you advertise is not efficiency, it's inventory. So what do I mean by that? When you buy something, you have an obligation to try and sell it at the best efficiency possible for that unit, right? You have to maximize the marginal value of everything you bought from the manufacturer. That doesn't mean that you can just set the ad account up and let it go wherever it wants relative to efficiency, because you may run out of stock on that thing. Totally. And then what, right? And so in so many ways, what you're describing is, I think, for every business that I watch right now, is this core challenge of deciding and connecting the dots between demand plan and demand creation. So I'm curious, as you do this, so you talked about you guys are running separate ad accounts, which I think is novel. Connor and I from Ridge talked about this the other day. They've done something similar at different times. They've gone back to one. They've tried different pixels. Like everybody's sort of trying to decide, like, how do we handle this from your standpoint? So I'm be curious, like, on the newer categories. So like the core business, I'm sure you have pretty clear unit economics that you want to hit. But as you're investing in a new channel, how do you think about the efficiency expectations for those categories as you're launching newer things?
So And it goes back to, is it a growth product or is it a seasonal product? On the seasonal products, and this is maybe a secret hack, but I really think it's going to be valuable for us. And we've started to see the beauty is just understanding weeks of supply. So get really granular. Let's say your email list is 100 people, to make it example, and you're saying on this seasonal item, we think 2 are going to come. Okay. So 2 a week. So that's how you'd buy those seasonal items. So if it's a seasonal collection that's coming out and you order it towards 4 or weeks of supply, then it can go in a new products ASC campaign within your legacy account. And it's gonna have marginal spend, like low spend. And it's 5 weeks of supply. So you really can't be burned that much on it. Now, if it's a new growth product, the way we do it, it has to test. Like, we don't take any big bets on new products just because we don't think we can afford it. So it first starts in that seasonal product. So if we have a cargo pant, for example, because there's a bunch of things we need to test on the seasonal one. What was the 5 weeks of supply daily velocity that we saw? That helps us. That's a data point. We also look at opportunity cost. What happened to the other category items during that same period of time? Did the joggers, did our straight leg pants without the pockets, how did they do? Did that happen? So do we need to now shift a little bit demand? And so there's a million things we look at, but so then the next season we say, okay, we want this to be a 12-week supply item from August, September, and October. We run a sale in August, September's demand's low, and then we want it sold by October. And then we have like a fail-safe plan. Okay, if it didn't go well, what's the longest we think we would have it, which is the end of year? Are we okay with that? But then we have a plan for the buy of the legacy item. So for our core items, we try to buy them every 2 weeks. So we can always mess with demand. So during that next PO buy, if that new item overperform or underperform, it could affect the other category products in that.
No, but it's
so it's a long-winded answer saying there's a lot of things we do, but we haven't mastered it yet. But I think over time we really look
creating
at
the framework for all the right considerations, right? So one of the things that I said, I think that is so important, especially in apparel, is the idea of demand displacement. Okay, so when we think about introducing a new product, it's very easy to go, oh, I think I'm going to sell 1,000 units. But the mistake people make is that they think all of those are going to be incremental new purchases. And oftentimes what you do, especially if you launch one pant, is that you might actually just siphon some demand from a previous product, right? And that to me is actually the hardest part to predict, is how much of this demand is going to be net new demand versus is just going to reduce the impact on other SKUs. So I love the sequence that you're talking about, where there's like a period of lower inventory risk that allows us to get some insight into that reality to better inform a larger purchase going forward, right? So there's almost a phased approach to it. Now, how do you think about that in fashion though? Because one of the concerns I would have is like, how do you guys think about how trend impacts present and future demand? And how does that relate to that decision for you guys in your category specifically?
That's the $1 million problem. I would hire more merchandisers than designers. We got in trouble with hiring designers that led the product team. And the designer is more trend focused versus a merchandiser is kind of looking in the future from like looking at the category. So just on a simple basis, looking at men's bottoms, what do we think that the demand is going to be for all of them together in the future? And so versus a designer is like, I want to make the best item that possible. So just leading on your merchandising more than your designers to help you with the buys, I think is super important. And that might be the best hire we've ever made is a good merchandiser, because, designers sometimes they put their hands around products and have too much of a personal viewpoint on it when it's maybe not best for the business, but that's a tangent. So I think we have a Friday Projects, which is a hype machine, but it allows us to test products to see how they do and understand how many weeks of supply to order. So that's been a huge process for Friday Projects.
So that's it.
Your original question was, how does trend affect PO buys? Luckily, we actually tried not to be the most trendy brand on purpose. So if it's a super trending product, there's a good likelihood that cuts won't do it. We've done it in the past. We don't want to do that anymore. But if you are a trend-based business, you're probably going to have to take some risk on product because that's your business. So just understanding who you are. Like I have a friend, this girl who runs an e-commerce brand, and she has so many, her problem is never product, or is CPMs. Like she has I look at her account and I'm like, how does she have these low CPMs? But she just has so much innovation in her account, but she can't get scale like Cuts can because she just can't order the demand. So for her business, it's all trends. So she has like 15 merchandisers and her head of growth, like not that important because they just put new products into ASC and they see what crushes. So that's maybe not the best answer, but just understanding what type of business you are,
well,
I would say is
I love
a
that
huge
you
answer.
Talked about this idea of who gets to decide what gets made. And there's two really important considerations, right? There's somebody has to represent the market, right? And that's what a great merchandiser is going to do is they're going to look at category demand across the men's apparel space generally and represent what are customers buying. And then you have a designer that then thinks about who is Cuts in that story and how do those things overlap. And I think so often I've seen brands that exist where somebody, and usually a lot of times early on, it's the founder who is a product person. They like to make stuff and they're sort of acting out of their own inspiration, which I think early on can be exciting. And you'll find a small cohort of people that are just like you and you'll be able to, find this like passionate group. But at some point you have to begin to understand what the market demand is more broadly and use that to inspire product development in a way. And so I think that is a really important way to think about solving for that problem in a way that I don't think it's a maturing process to get to a role like that exists. And I think we're going to see more of the core roles inside of an organization that I believe are going to move out of this head of growth being the most important person to actually it's this demand planning and merchandising is the thing that actually enables growth. Because without the right product at the right moment, that person is useless. They cannot make demand for a thing that doesn't exist in stock or is the wrong margin or isn't what the market is looking for.
And one, I think for young founders, like how you're going to build your business, what products are going to fuel other products and who's going to pay for what. So like our t-shirts pay for a lot of failed misses in other items, but there's a repeatability of things we can count on. Like maybe t-shirts have come down or gone up, but there's repeatability in the business. Building some type of cadence to your business is so important, and products that you can count on, because I think it can be really hard if you're trying to reinvent the wheel every season.
There's also this sort of like marginal frontier for every product category where it's like, okay, maybe you can, using Meta as a primary demand lever, get men's t-shirts to $30 million a year profitably. And then every time you sort of press beyond that, the CAC sort of degrades. So you can like ram your head against that wall infinitely trying to expand it. Or you can go, okay, no. That's a foundation. That's 30 million a year foundationally. Now let's layer on incremental new categories that expand beyond that. Now, they're probably not all going to be as big as this one. This might be the biggest one, but maybe it's 7 million in pants and then 4 million in sweatshirt, whatever. You just start to think about how each of those as different businesses add to the incremental story of the whole thing. And then there's some cross-sell eventually, but mainly these are like almost net new businesses altogether.
And one thing too that we've really learned is, so January through the end of the year, or January through like August, big t-shirt season. Then it's also like what time of year the products are going to do most for you. So when we try to push t-shirts in fall, that's when it becomes conversion rate dips and it becomes harder to sell it. So that piece of information, our demand planner says, okay, we're gonna shift down t-shirts during that period and go more mid layers and bottoms. So in years past, we had way too many t-shirts during that phase. So, and our cash was stuck, and then we got stuck with those. So your head of growth and your demand planner need to be in lockstep of what you're advertising, so you can get in and out of cash with the right season. And for us, it's like we'll always have black and white t-shirts 24 year, but the colors will go like this and then come down. And in apparel, it's so important that you clean out your inventory and find those liquidation channels to get rid of the death by 1,000 cuts. We're still nowhere near where we need to be, and we'll be there in about a year and a half. But at any season, get rid of the double XLs that aren't selling. They're not going to sell on your site. Don't leave them up there. Get rid of them. It may only seem like $1,000, and you're like, oh, it's not that much money. But that times how many SKUs, that's where your cash is. So just finding ways to get rid of them, even at a slight loss potentially, could be better, just to not have the problem balloon. Maybe one of the most important things you'll hear on this podcast.
I did this episode where me and Dave from Marbury and Bamboo and Mike Beckham are talking about this idea of return on invested capital, where businesses all the time are looking for a way to deploy money for the sake of generating the best possible return. And as a founder, so often you reach the stage of your business where you're a capital allocator, you're making bets on things relative to their expected value or return for you. And so a lot of times when people do that calculation, they look at a product category and they go, I think we could do $10 million in revenue or off this product category, right? And so they go, well, I got to spend $1 million and I could make 10. Okay, there's some expected value in that calculation, but the part that they miss about how to make that a better bet, and you're hitting on it now, is the way to improve the expected value of any bet that you make is actually to decrease the risk. So if you think about it, if in this process, when you make that $1 million bet, if you don't have a liquidation mechanism, maybe your risk of loss is like almost all the $1 million, right? Because it would just end up sitting and go bad and you couldn't liquidate it. But if you can create a liquidation mechanism that says, a worst case scenario, we could sell it all for $250,000. Well, what you've done is you've actually significantly improved the odds of that investment by raising the floor. And that as a strategy is massively underrated from an investment thesis. If you can raise the floor of every bet that you make, your odds of success go way, way up. And so I think you guys are discovering that. Yeah.
Another way to raise the floor is size, like how you buy sizes by seasonal collections. So like for certain colors that we put that are seasonal, the smalls, like the cliff hanging sizes, which is small and double XL, or in women's, it could be double extra small or large. We're going to order those like 1 week or 2 weeks of supply because we just have zero risk for those. We know we're leaving stuff out, but we know if a large is left on the site, it'll eventually sell. So just understanding weeks of supply by size on a seasonal collection, because that's where there's a ton of risk where it can't stay forever, is where we've gotten better. So we don't, it's not just sticker, weeks of supply by size. And then when it's size and seasonal color, it's even lower.
This is so good. I think that there is no more complex financial system than an e-commerce apparel business. It is about as hard as it gets. It is level 9 or 9.5 on the complexity scale. And everything that you're describing are the ways in which you take a business that the beautiful thing about it is people love clothes. They buy the heck out of clothes. And so there's so much market. There's a huge TAM and so much opportunity to do rad stuff. But the mechanics of actually turning it into a business that produces cash is a challenge. And you are on that journey and learning a lot that people can benefit from, man. So any last things that you would leave for an aspiring young e-commerce entrepreneur in the apparel category?
So this is like an ego one that you'll love, Taylor. And we've talked about this before, but when Cuts was growing really fast, I had a lot of aspirations to have, that fancy office and all these employees, and kind of like, I loved suits, right? When you walk around, it was just so cool and all that. But I lost touch what made Cuts great. We could keep up X pennies, like nothing, to run a really large scale business. But we gave away it's an asset to be able to spend 30-40% of marketing on revenue. If you can do that profitably, don't listen to the people that say you can't. The only reason you can is if your OpEx now balloons and it needs to be more manageable. Sean at Ridge is a good example where they have a really low OpEx and they're almost at 50%. So that can be an asset. So just don't let these other things, these shiny new toys, get in the way of like what actually drives value for your business. We've been there. It often means finding, talent that can do a lot, and you don't need a new role for everything you need to do, which was just something that we got in trouble with. You don't need a nice office. You don't need all those meals that you got used to on the corporate card. The better thing is just having a good balance sheet that really drives a good valuation for your business. So, learn from this conversation and just go about it
e-commerce
in the right
is a
way.
Business that's about operating leverage. And what I am constantly blown away by people's capacity to develop novel solutions to workload problems, right? And so often we want to insert a human in there, but in many ways that can be such a limiter on the business's necessity to solve for it systematically or operationally in a way that doesn't actually require a person. And you're right. If you have the ability to be lean on the people and OpEx side, you get to fuel growth. And we call it fuel profit. It's the dollars left over after your cost of goods that you have to put into marketing. And the leaner your team is, the faster you can get after it. Steven, you're the man. Where should people follow you? What's the best place to keep an eye on your journey?
at Stephen Borrelli on Instagram, at Stephen Borrelli on Twitter. We just launched the Stephen Borrelli podcast where we interview founders and CEOs, athletes. Check that out. And listen to Taylor if you're running a new e-com. His YouTube is better for really nuanced advice. I would definitely recommend that. I still like when I'll DM Taylor still when he comes out with the new P&L. He just came out with the P&L of how you want to see it. He updated it. I sent it to our accounting manager. Said I need to see ours like this. It needs to be like this, and our numbers better be what he says is good.
You're the man, dude. I appreciate you. I'm excited to cruise up and check out the spot here soon in LA. The production on the podcast is sick, by the way. You guys are doing good work with that. I love the episode. I've seen all the clips with you and Sean. I'm excited to jam into that. But dude, I appreciate you. Appreciate your candor and your willingness to share. And we'll see you on Twitter.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Appreciate you.